The soup was still warm when I sat down, but something about the room felt off. The wine glass across from mine had a faint lipstick print, the kind she usually wiped away before taking a sip. Her napkin was folded, untouched. Only one spoon had been used. That's when I knew. She always took her time when she left, pausing to ask if I needed anything, fussing with her scarf in the mirror, brushing lint from my shoulder before heading out. But that evening, she barely made eye contact. Said she was going to a corporate mixer for the climbing club. Said she'd be back late. Didn't even kiss me goodbye. The soup, which I'd spent nearly an hour making something rustic and warming with thyme and white beans, cooled slowly between us. I stared at the two bowls, the two chairs, the two candles flickering low, and started doing the kind of math people do when they're alone with too many signs. I waited until midnight. Pretended to read. Pretended I wasn't listening for the sound of gravel under tires. Then I opened the window. Mountain air rushed in, sharp and honest. I kept telling myself she just got caught up. Stayed longer. Forgot to text. It happens. But my stomach stayed clenched. The cabin was our supposed retreat. A place we called our reset button when things in the city felt frayed. We'd spent weekends here rebuilding trust, talking late into the night, holding each other like the world outside was just noise. But lately, even here, she'd been quieter. Phones face down. Smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. I sat there all night. At dawn, I finally blew out the candles. The cold had crept in through the windows, and the soup had congealed. I rinsed both bowls, stacked them carefully in the dishwasher. Her wine glass still had that single smudge. I didn't touch it. By then, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I just felt something inside me shift. Like a door that had been closed for a long time, quietly cracking open. She wasn't coming back to the version of me she left behind. And maybe that version of me never existed in the first place. It was 10:08 a.m. when I opened her tablet. Not because I wanted to snoop. I just needed to know. She hadn't come home that night. No text. No call. Not even a breadcrumb. And I'd been pacing the floor for hours, trying to pretend like I wasn't waiting for proof of what I already knew deep down. The tablet was still on the charging dock by the kitchen. She always kept it locked, but I knew the password. She wasn't careful about that. She never thought I'd look. The screen came to life with a soft glow. I stared at the home screen a moment longer than I should have, like I was staring into a mirror that might tell me whether I'd survive what I was about to see. I tapped into her photo files, scrolled past old hiking clips, board meeting slides, snippets from our anniversary dinner a year ago that I barely remembered being part of. Then I saw the folder. It was labeled Memorabilia. I paused, already feeling my throat tighten. Inside were thumbnails, pictures from her climbing trips, boozy brunches with people I didn't know, and filtered selfies with captions like Reset Day or Nothing Like Altitude to Clear Your Mind. And then, near the bottom, there was a video with no thumbnail. Just a gray box, timestamped from 3 nights ago. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. The screen flickered to life. Shaky footage of a fire pit, soft music in the background, the gentle clink of glasses. Then her face appeared, flushed from wine, maybe from something worse. She leaned into someone off camera, someone whose hand slid around her shoulder like it belonged there. A man's voice murmured something, and she laughed. God, that laugh. It wasn't the kind she gave me when I told a joke. It was looser, fuller, and worse. There was something mean in it. That brittle edge she got when she was drinking too fast and feeling too free. Oh my God, he still thinks I'm at a mixer, she said, slurring just enough to stab. Poor Harris. Sweet, oblivious Harris. The man chuckled too. Then he whispered something, and she tilted her head toward him, still smiling. Sure, don't make me spill the wine. He checks for stains. They both laughed at that. My name didn't come up again, but it didn't need to. I watched another 10 seconds, her leaning into him like she belonged there, then hit pause. The room was too quiet, and my ears were ringing. I closed the tablet, and for a second, I held it in both hands like a dead thing. Cold. Still. Just a slab of glass and plastic that now held the confirmation I didn't want but already suspected. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was orchestrated. A careful arrangement of shadows and distance. She hadn't drifted from me. She had designed a life beyond me. I stood up slowly, carried the tablet back to the dock, and set it down like a coffin lid. Then I walked outside into the cold morning air, trying to remember what my name sounded like when she used to say it with love. If she ever really did. I don't know what I was looking for when I started walking through the cabin, but something in me needed to feel unsettled on purpose. The powder room was locked. It hadn't been opened in years. That little space off the back hall with the outdated tile and the mirrors she used to complain about. We stopped using it ages ago when the sink started leaking. Said we'd get it fixed. Never did. But that morning, standing there barefoot on the cold wood floor, I noticed something I hadn't before. Her key ring was missing. And the door, once stiff and sticky from years of not being touched, had tiny scrape marks near the handle. She had been in there. The scent hit me before I even turned the knob. Her perfume. Faint. Sweet. Artificial. Something that used to make me lean in close now made my stomach turn. I didn't break the lock. I just waited. Walked away. Instead, I wandered the rest of the house, which somehow felt too staged. Like one of those model homes in a real estate brochure. The throw blanket on the couch was folded too neatly. The kitchen towels were aligned like she'd measured them. There wasn't a single dirty dish in the sink. Not a mug out of place. Not even a breadcrumb on the cutting board. Everything was in order. And somehow, that order felt more brutal than chaos ever could. In the bedroom, her pillow still held the imprint of her head. That curve her neck always made when she turned away from me in the middle of the night. I stood there staring at it. This weird dent in the fabric that felt like a fingerprint from someone already gone. She hadn't slept here in days. Or maybe she had. Alone. Maybe that dent was just memory, holding shape longer than it should. I opened the drawer on her side of the bed. The usual junk was there. Hair ties, a few faded receipts, lip balm, but also a folded map with a logo on it. Something red and crisp, like it had been recently handled. I unfolded it, careful not to tear the creases. It was a brochure from Granite Heights. A climbing retreat. Private access only. I remembered her mentioning the name once, months ago, in a tone she used when she wanted me to forget something. I hadn't thought about it since. Tucked inside was a crimson paper wristband. Cheap. Sweat-warped. It had the words Granite Heights Private in bold white ink. Below that, hand-scrawled in black marker, the initials GH. Her club's president. The guy she used to roll her eyes about. The one she said tried too hard to impress everyone with Patagonia jackets and faux humility. She used to joke that his idea of flirting was offering sunscreen and unsolicited beta on a route. But now his initials were on her wristband. I walked to the kitchen and placed the band on the table, right beside the soup bowl I'd never cleared. A quiet offering to the truth. I didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. I just stood there, the cabin stretching wide and hollow around me, feeling more like a showroom than a home. I finally understood what had been bothering me since I woke up. She hadn't just left me. She had been preparing for me to notice. And she wasn't afraid of what I'd do. She was counting on me to stay still, to stay polite, to behave like a man already removed from his own life. And for the first time in months, I wondered if I actually had. Her study always felt like a line I wasn't supposed to cross. It was her thinking space, she said. Her sanctuary. She used to joke that it was the one place in the house where my energy didn't belong. I'd respected that for years, but that morning, I didn't knock. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The air was different in there. Cooler, somehow. Still, like the room had been waiting for me. Nothing had changed on the surface. Her corkboard still held the same color-coded sticky notes, and the bookshelf leaned slightly to the left, just as it always had. But the papers on her desk were new. I could tell by the sharpness of the ink, the way they weren't weighted down by dust. I stepped closer and saw the words Velvet Thursday printed in bold at the top of a stapled document. I didn't know what it meant, but I kept reading. It looked like a campaign plan. Charts, projections, a list of tasks with initials next to each. Hers were marked with a looping cursive L. The name Cashin appeared 3 times. Logistics. Budget. Outreach. But one note, scribbled on a yellow post-it near the edge of the stack, stopped me cold. 8:45. He still doesn't know. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. I stared at it, that single sentence vibrating in my head. Not just the words, but the timing. The precision. Someone doesn't write something like that unless they're counting down to something. Unless they're watching. Unless they want to remember exactly when ignorance became useful. I turned around, scanning the room for her phone. It was always on the charger by the window. Always. But now, the charger was empty. That's when I heard it. A faint vibration from outside the window, then another. I rushed out the front door and toward the driveway, my heart thudding hard in my chest. My car sat untouched, still parked where I left it the night before. But when I opened the passenger door, I saw it, her phone, Screen lit up from an incoming call. Cash and V. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I tapped the screen instead and pulled up the messages. There were dozens from the past few days. Screenshots of apartment listings. A blurry selfie of the two of them on what looked like a balcony somewhere high up. His arm wrapped around her. She was smiling the way people smile when they're not pretending. And the text from last night, the same night she claimed to be at that mixer, read. Still can't believe he has no idea. You're seriously a magician. I locked the phone and let it fall into the passenger seat like it was something toxic. This wasn't a detour. This wasn't her trying to figure things out. This was a structure, built in layers, in whispers and locked doors and private messages and wristbands that weren't meant to be found. She hadn't made a mistake. She had made a plan. I leaned on the car for a long while, staring up at the pine trees above. Their tips disappeared into a gray sky, indifferent to what was unraveling beneath them. Back in the house, I sat on the edge of her desk and looked at all the objects she'd once guarded like sacred relics. Her favorite pen, her organizer, a mug from her old firm that read, "Make bold moves." I almost laughed. Everything I'd touched today had peeled back another layer. Not just of betrayal, but of strategy. Like I'd been cast in a play and handed a script written by everyone but me. And I was starting to realize the curtain had already fallen. I just hadn't noticed I was left standing on stage, alone. The guest room door was slightly open. That was strange enough on its own. We never used that room. It had become a holding space for old camping gear, forgotten books, and unopened boxes we kept promising to sort through. I pushed the door all the way open. At first glance, it looked the same. Still cluttered, still dusty near the windows. But then I noticed the suitcase. Dark green, half-zipped, sitting square in the middle of the bed like someone had paused while packing and never returned. Inside were neatly folded clothes, not hers. Men's clothes. A dress shirt. Slacks. A tailored wool coat folded carefully on top, the kind you buy when you want to impress someone without trying too hard. The monogram stitched inside the collar caught the light. GH. Her club president. The man she said was a blowhard. A climber who played businessman. The same guy who once made a pass at her during a fundraiser, and she'd come home fuming. Called him pathetic. Now his coat was in our house, in a bag that had clearly been packed with care. I didn't move the suitcase. I didn't need to. It already screamed loud enough. And then I heard the front door open. Her voice followed, light and breezy like nothing had happened. "Honey," she called. "I grabbed eggs and that oat milk you like." Her words cut off when she stepped into the hallway and saw me standing at the top of the stairs, holding the monogrammed coat. The grocery bag swung slightly from her hand, and for a split second, something flickered across her face. Not shock. Not fear. Calculation. She blinked, smiled softly. "Hey. I can explain." I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked back into the guest room. She followed, setting the groceries on the dresser without looking at me. Like we were going to have a normal conversation in the middle of this minefield. "That's not what you think," she said carefully. "I borrowed it after the retreat. It got cold that night. That's why it's folded next to slacks and a toothbrush?" I asked, still not looking at her. She sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Okay, yes, it's his. But it's not what you're imagining. We were sharing the space, that's all. The club had limited rooms." I pointed at the open suitcase. "And a half-packed bag?" She crossed her arms. "That's just stuff I was planning to donate. I didn't think I needed to explain every little thing in this house." "You didn't," I said quietly. "Your phone already did that for you." That got her attention. Her expression faltered, then hardened. "You went through my phone?" "No," I said, walking over to the bed. I laid down the coat next to the suitcase and then placed the crimson wristband, the sticky note, and finally the tablet, now unlocked, on top of it all. "You left it in my car." Her calm began to crack. Her mouth opened like she was about to lie again, but she hesitated. Her eyes scanned the items like they might reorder themselves into a more forgiving story. "You shouldn't have gone through my things," she said flatly. "And you shouldn't have built a second life inside our home," I said, finally turning to face her. She opened her mouth again, but this time, nothing came out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't call her names. I just stood there in the center of that cold, forgotten guest room, surrounded by the evidence she never intended for me to find. "You could have told me," I said. "You could have told me a year ago, or a month ago, or last night." She shook her head slowly. "You don't understand it." "No," I cut in. "I understand perfectly now." She took a step forward. "Harris, I didn't want to hurt you." I gave her a tired smile. You just didn't want to get caught. She looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just stood there, breathing slowly, eyes locked on mine. And for a second, she looked like a stranger trying to remember what name she used to call me by. I left the room without another word. Behind me, the silence felt heavier than anything she could have said. I didn't sleep in the house that night. I grabbed a blanket and a pillow and curled up in the driver's seat of my car, parked in the gravel just outside the cabin. The engine stayed off. No music, no heater. Just the sound of wind in the trees and the occasional creak of settling wood behind the windows I couldn't bring myself to look at. She didn't come out. Didn't knock. Maybe she thought I'd come back in. Maybe she was hoping I wouldn't. In the quiet hours just before dawn, I sat up, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, and noticed something odd in the rearview mirror. A bag in the back seat. Not mine. I climbed out and opened the trunk. It was hers. A faded blue duffel bag with a broken zipper and a patch that read Sierra Summit 2016. The kind of bag she always said she was going to throw away but never did. I hadn't noticed it back there before. Maybe she'd put it in while I was distracted. Maybe it had always been there, hiding in plain sight. I unzipped it slowly. Inside were clothes, a travel-sized toiletry kit, an old paperback with a cracked spine. But deeper down, tucked between rolled shirts, I found a bundle of letters. Real letters, paper, envelopes, stamps. Not emails. Not texts. Each one signed, Bo. The first few were innocent. Vague. Catching up. Talking about the climbing club, their shared past, little memories she'd never mentioned to me. But as I kept reading, the tone changed. Grew more urgent. Bo wasn't just an old friend. He was part of something. The letters had dates. Months back. Then weeks. The last one was from just a few days ago. It read, "Finish it or don't. He's not stupid, you know. This dragging it out makes things messy. I won't keep waiting. Bo." I sat there, letter trembling slightly in my hands, heart thudding like it was trying to knock its way out of my chest. This wasn't just cheating. It wasn't about some emotional connection or a need that hadn't been met. This was coordinated, timed, built piece by piece like a plan drawn on a whiteboard I'd never been allowed to see. Finish it or don't. The words echoed like a dare. I looked back at the other letters. So many of them referenced vague moves and cover stories. There were mentions of "you're out" and "next steps" and "Delise." One letter, dated 4 weeks ago, included the line, "Cashin can take over the car. Once the name's changed, it'll be smooth." I felt something cold settle in my gut. They were preparing for a transfer. A takeover. I hadn't been betrayed like a man who lost his wife. I'd been displaced like a tenant overstaying his lease. It wasn't about falling out of love. It was about removing me. Quietly. Neatly. Without a scene. Every clue I'd uncovered wasn't accidental. It was the visible part of a deeper structure, carefully constructed beneath my feet. The soup, the locked door, the coat, the suitcase, those were just breadcrumbs. The real betrayal had been happening in whispers and strategy sessions I hadn't been invited to. Bo wasn't a rebound. He was the original. I was the placeholder. The interim. I zipped the bag back up, sat on the edge of the trunk, and stared into the trees as the sun started to rise. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt erased. The version of me who believed in our life, our little traditions, our weekend rituals and Sunday coffee routines, that version had been quietly overwritten. And the worst part was realizing she never meant for me to find this bag. She didn't forget it. She just didn't think I'd ever look. By that afternoon, I wasn't numb anymore. Something had shifted. The sadness had curdled into clarity. I wasn't just the man she stopped loving. I was the man she'd quietly worked around. Replaced. Folded out of the picture like the back panel of a brochure. So I went back inside and turned on her computer. She'd always been meticulous, the kind of person who alphabetized emails and backed up files in cloud drives with redundant naming systems. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A folder on her desktop labeled Admin. Inside were spreadsheets, personal finance notes, and a subfolder marked TL, Final. I opened it. Dozens of emails. All between her and someone named Tessa Lane. The subject lines weren't dramatic. No declarations. No affection. Just cold logistics. Property handover outline. Asset division, action items. Lease change request form, draft. And there it was in black and white. Once he's out, your name goes on the lease. Cashin will handle the car. Bo's suggestion about liquidating the shared account still stands. Let me know once the keys are surrendered. I read that line 5 times. Once he's out. Out. Like I was a temporary guest. A squatter with mail still coming in. Not a man who shared a bed, built a home, planned a life. This wasn't heartbreak. It was bookkeeping. I scrolled down through the chain. Another email included a checklist. Remove Harris's name from insurance. Redirect mail. Prepay 3 months of utilities under new name. Prep guest room as transitional space, GH's suggestion. The guest room. The suitcase. Everything matched. This wasn't her slipping away. This was her dismantling. Each step, each lie, each withheld truth, it was all part of a process designed to minimize conflict. I wasn't supposed to fight. I was supposed to drift off like fog when the sun came up. I sat back in her chair and stared at the screen. Bo wasn't just some emotional affair. He'd been there all along, helping her blueprint my removal. Cashin, the second man, the placeholder between me and Bo, he wasn't a rival. He was a facilitator, a tool. And this Tessa? She was the administrator. The quiet hand helping finalize what felt, in every way, like a transfer of ownership. I hadn't been cheated on. I'd been transitioned out. Like a CFO getting replaced in a corporate reshuffle. No yelling. No tears. Just silent signatures on PDF forms. I printed the emails. Not because I needed proof. Because I needed something to hold while I buried the last lie I believed, that we'd simply grown apart. We hadn't drifted. She'd rerouted the entire road, and I was just now seeing the dead end. I left the papers stacked neatly on the kitchen counter. When she saw them, I wanted her to know. I finally understood what I was. A buffer. A placeholder. A name that used to be on the lease. It was nearly midnight when I heard the soft creak of stairs under her feet. She moved like someone stepping through fog, slow and unsure. I stayed seated at the dining table, back straight, eyes on nothing. The house around us felt like it was waiting. She came into the room barefoot, wearing one of my old hoodies like it meant something. I thought you were asleep, she said gently, like the war hadn't already happened. I didn't answer. Just waited. She stood there for a moment, then sat across from me, resting her arms on the table like we were just going to talk about groceries or weekend plans. Her eyes were tired. Not from crying. From holding everything in too long. I didn't want it to be like this, she whispered. I gave her a moment. Let the quiet do the talking. She sighed. Bo was there before you. Years before. We were off and on for a long time. And then I met you. I tilted my head slightly. And I was what? The trial period? The cooling off phase? She looked down. You were safe. That stung more than I expected. Safe. Not loved. Not wanted. Just stable enough to hold the space until something riskier felt viable again. She looked back up. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I didn't plan to stay with you this long. But you're good. You've always been good to me. I laughed once, short and dry. You don't get points for noticing that now. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. I didn't know how to end it. Bo always said it was better to wait. That either you'd catch on or fade away. That if I pushed too hard, you'd stay. I shook my head slowly, more in disbelief than rage. So the plan was what? Leave the door open and hope I walked out of it on my own? She didn't deny it. I couldn't handle a confrontation. I didn't want to be the villain. You just wanted to vanish without blood on your hands. She exhaled shakily. I know I screwed it up. I know this looks bad. No, I cut in. This doesn't look bad. This is bad. But I'm done cataloging the pieces. She swallowed hard, like there was still something stuck in her throat. Maybe a lie she hadn't rehearsed well enough. I looked her in the eyes. I let you go 3 days ago. You just didn't notice. She blinked, and for a second I saw something flicker, something fragile, something real. Do you mean that? She asked. I stood slowly. I do. And I mean this too. You don't owe me an explanation anymore. You owe me silence. She nodded, lips pressed together like she finally got it. I left her there at the table, the hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, the air between us colder than anything the mountain could throw our way. She thought this moment would be the ending. She didn't realize it had already happened. I left just after sunrise. No bags. No final words. Just the clothes on my back and the keys in my pocket. She was still asleep, curled on the couch like someone trying to reverse time through posture. I didn't watch her. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing else to say. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I walked to the car. The air was sharp, clean, unburdened. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without second-guessing it. I drove slowly, down winding mountain roads lined with pine and ice-crusted fences. The kind of route we used to take hand in hand, Windows cracked just enough to let the cold in. Now it felt like a ghost road, full of echoes I didn't care to revisit. As I passed through the edges of the old town, familiar places blurred by. The diner where we'd once stopped for pie after getting caught in a snowstorm. The bookstore where she pretended to like science fiction just because I did. I didn't flinch as I passed them. I didn't feel loss. I felt distance. And in that distance, peace. By mid-morning, I pulled off the highway and into a little diner I'd never been to. A squat building with chipped blue paint and a flickering sign that read Molly's. It wasn't special, and maybe that's why it was perfect. I sat in a corner booth. No one knew my name. No one asked where I'd come from or why I looked like I hadn't slept in days. The waitress poured me a coffee. I added sugar, stirred slowly, then took a sip. It tasted like a beginning. I watched cars pass on the road outside. People heading somewhere, probably thinking about errands or kids or deadlines. For once, I wasn't rushing to catch up. I wasn't mourning her. I was mourning the man I used to be, the man who bent himself into polite shapes, who believed silence was loyalty, who thought love meant waiting for someone to choose you again and again. That man was gone. In his place was someone quieter, sharper, clearer. Someone who'd learned to recognize an open wound disguised as a relationship. Someone who didn't need to be chosen to know his worth. I didn't know where I was headed next. I didn't care. All I knew was that I was moving forward. And I was doing it alone. Not abandoned. Not broken. Just free. It took a few weeks, but I found a rhythm. A small apartment on the second floor of an old brick building became home. One bedroom, a creaky radiator, and a view of a laundromat's roof. It wasn't the mountains, but it didn't feel haunted. That was enough. I kept things simple. Mattress on the floor for now. A thrift store couch. A coffee table made from old wood crates. The silence was different here, not sharp, not judging. Just quiet. It let me think. I got a part-time gig at a bookstore downtown. The kind with mismatched shelves and a bell on the door. I wasn't looking for a career shift, but something about the quiet hum of pages and regulars looking for lost stories felt like the right kind of medicine. The days moved. I started waking up without her name in my chest. I stopped expecting to see her shampoo in the shower or her shoes by the door. Little ghosts, fading. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in her handwriting. Slanted slightly, like always. I stood in the kitchen with the envelope in my hands, debating whether to open it. I did. It was short. No greeting. No apology. I thought I'd feel free. I don't. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just that one sentence, written in dark blue ink, like she wanted it to look elegant even as it fell apart. I read it once. Then folded it neatly, placed it in a drawer next to take-out menus and spare keys, and shut it quietly. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. She had made her choice. And I had finally made mine. I stepped out onto the fire escape and lit a match. Not for the letter, but just to feel the warmth against my fingers. Below me, traffic murmured. A kid laughed somewhere in the alley. Life moved. The sky wasn't clearer because she was gone. It was clearer because I was here now, fully. Finally. And this time, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was already home.